In quick tip 462, we began showing you my process for working, my process for creating a painting. This is a continuation of that process. In the process in that quick tip, I showed you the sequence I always go through, and I took you through the sequence, the first and second steps of my sequence. Here I want to begin with the third step of my sequence, and that is exploring the light and shadow. What's happening? What's the light source doing to this subject? People don't realize how important that is, because you see the colors you see because of the light, the way the light's striking it, or the kind of light it is. So that's so important. Now, I went through just a very quick placement of my image. I see, and I said there that sometimes when we get as we're placing an image, we need to do some editing, some adjustment. And I will usually go through maybe a finer adjustment before I go into the plotting of the light and shadow. But I have one little thing I spotted here that I think is necessary. I would like to show just a little bit more of the size and the angle of this part of that cone. And so I just make that little indication there. A lot of times when we have parts like this, I might, in the process of discovering the light and shadow, I might save some parts of an image and just indicate them with the light and shadow instead of making lines to indicate them. But here, what I'll do is I'll sort of indicate this part, just these parts. I'm just going to indicate them like this, not so much full drawing of them, just sort of indicate where they're going to go, like that. And then this one turns and takes a different direction there. This one's more beside it here, and so on. And so I think maybe that might be sufficient for that. And there, in the early parts of placing and getting the light and shadow portion of your painting, is the best time to edit things, that edit shapes, we might say, and the shape relationships. So if you wait till the very end before you start editing, you might get in trouble. But as we go along, we may not always get it the way we want it to be or the way we see it the first time. We don't worry about that. Even the masters don't always get it absolutely the way they want it the first time. We always give ourselves that option of making changes, and always be willing to make changes, be willing to spot surprises. And sometimes the painting itself will decide it wants to go in a direction a little different. We are always open to discover. So I want to explore and discover and place the light and shadow now. And what I see in here, what I see in this, is that the light source is way back here and relatively low in the sky. I would say that maybe that's probably either early in the morning or late in the afternoon. We can tell that because this is lighter here and the shadow portion is over here. We also can tell it here that this part is lighter and then it falls into shadow here. And so we always think if those light rays are coming this way and they're shooting out and they're landing on the image, where are they landing? And that's how we find that. So for this one, I'm just going to use my Tombow pen. This is a Tombow N65. It's a gray pen and it's water soluble. And so it's a really good, when you're doing a small piece like this, it's really good for indicating the lights and shadows. there is a name for what I'm about to do. It's called no tan. What it does, the no tan, is a Japanese word that records light and shadow, or records light and dark. And we apply it into our painting by using that system of putting just a single value where we see shadow, where shadow becomes the subject, and leaving untouched where we see light. And that's what I'm going to do. So here, now I'm just going to begin to discover what that light source is doing. Where is it causing shadow? And I'm seeing this whole area right here fall into shadow. And so I'll just throw that whole area into shadow. Now, I also sometimes, and you'll find other quick tips where I have done this with a brush and a wash. Now, in quick tip 44, I show the whole process of doing a no tan. But if you will search on our channel page for no tan, you'll find other quick tips where I have used the no tan. And we do have a full-length video we made years and years ago called No Tan, How and Why, where I start with a no tan and then I show how to flesh it out. But here we're just going to show you the process. So here I'm seeing that this is in shadow. This falls up in the shadow, so I'll just use my little pen there, sort of shape that falls into shadow. And as it comes over, this part falls into shadow. And I'll shape that right there. And that's going to be just right, just about touching the edge, but not quite. We don't want something like this touching an edge ever, because then it starts feeling like it's a part of that edge. That comes down like that, and the whole thing, this whole area, is in shadow here. So I'll just throw that all into that single value that says to me, shadow. And you'll see when we get to the other quick tips down the road where I show you how I use that to decide which colors and values of colors to go in, how helpful that can be to have that little guide on the painting before we start. And so then I'll continue there and see what's in. Now that one has a little bit of what we call reflective light on it, where it really is in shadow, but that reflective light is causing the more of the hue to come out of that shadow. So we won't call that light, we'll call that shadow as well. And it comes down sort of like this and moves right into here, and then this part is in shadow, in shadow, in shadow, in shadow. Here comes right, the shadow comes right on the top of the head right there and goes around. And let's see what's happening there. Okay, that throws the eye right back in here, and I didn't place the eye yet, but throws it right back in there. So I'll just look at the size of that shadow. That will indicate to me where that eye is going to go. I'll look at the size of that shadow, and I see the bit of shadows coming down like that and going around, sort of peters out as it goes down like that. Now, let's see what's happening here. That part's going into shadow too. And let's see. We sort of have a little bit of a dip there, and it moves up like that and up like that. And that's almost even with the other one. I don't know if I want to make that even. We'll find out when later. Not today, but later. Okay. And then as it comes around, what happens with that shadow? This shadow is doing this. Now, I don't need to know it's a shadow of. All I need to be able to do is to see it as shadow and as a shape of shadow. That is very, very important to being able to really show what time of day it is and what the light source is doing. And so I'm not concerned with a shadow of what. I'm just concerned with shape of shadow. So I move that up, and then I'll see this little part is only partially in shadow. So if it's only partially in shadow, I'm going to make it partially in shadow, like that. And then it comes down like that. Let's see. Keep that related. And then as it comes over, that little shadow dips about right in here, kind of like that, and moves up. And we have some little parts in there that are in shadow, but those little textural things are catching some light. That whole area is still in shadow. Okay, then it goes up like this, and let's see, be sure I'm in the right one. That one is also, oh, that one's all in shadow. That little piece right there is all in shadow. So we'll just make it all in shadow. And then it comes down and we have a tiny little piece that is partially in shadow. And see, get that relationship right, that placement right. That was just partially in shadow. And then the shadow sort of begins to peter out about right here. That part that's in deep shadow or in a solid shadow begins to sort of peter out about right there. And then what happens next? Well, you know, kind of catch it as we go. Let's see, this part falls into shadow right there. Now let's see, gotta be sure I've got my alignment. A part of the eye is in shadow and a part is not. So let's see if we can kind of catch that. And I probably can refine that better when I get into the actual placement of paint. And then we see that shadow portion begins to come downhill like that. And then we see a little bit of shadow that sort of does like that. Now it can begin to move downward, and I will use strokes like this as I'm moving downward. And I'm seeing that the shadow portion comes about like that as it moves down. Now I'm moving downward with strokes like that because I see little bitty pieces of light popping through. And this is just a pattern of guiding me to guiding what I do with the color and the value when I actually begin the blocking part of this. So I don't have to be that precise. Now let's see, how does that shadow catch on that back? About right like that. And by the way, this too, we sometimes will need to edit. Sometimes we'll need to edit once we put the light and shadow pattern in. Now that is, I've got that going all the way down, so I'm just going to take it all the way off down the edge like that. Light and shadow. And then we've got some little bits and pieces of shadow that are beginning to come in this direction. It shows something of that character of those feathers. And this comes on over, and the shadow comes to about right here. It begins to kind of taper off, kind of peter out about right here. So remember, this is just a very general placement of the shadow. So we've got that much right now of the light and shadow. And now I can begin to come down here and see now what is actually happening in this area here. I get to the beak, and I need to watch carefully. So this portion of the beak is in a bit of shadow. Because of the way the beak is turned, it's in a bit of shadow. So I'll just put that there. And then that shadow kind of inches up into here, and then it moves back like this and down sort of like that. There's a little bit of shadow right there. Let's see, now how does that, this part of the beak is in shadow. So we'll just make that part of the beak in shadow. In fact, that whole area there, that is in shadow. We have reflective light down there, but it's still in shadow. Remember, reflective light shows in shadow. Reflective light won't show where the light rays are hitting because the light rays are stronger than the reflective light. So, and by the way, it's a good idea to squint when you're doing this part. It's a good idea to squint so that you can really see, really discern the shadow. Now, the shadow part of this begins to come up like that, and it begins to move down, and it sort of moves down in this direction with a little bit of an angle right here that falls about like that. And then this falls into shadow. Well, actually, that looks like it's this is sort of translucent, and this probably is a shadow created behind it. But we don't try to figure out it's not a good idea to try to label it so much just as it is to locate shadow as shadow. And so we'll just locate that as shadow. And then there are portions down here that begin to kind of fall a little bit into shadow. So we'll indicate that. Let's see now, as I squint at it, or I see a little bit more of the light and shadow pattern over there. Now I'm going to say, I want to make some decisions about how I will show light and shadow in the background. What's going to happen there in the way of light and shadow? I can choose, and I think I will, choose in the areas where the areas are lighter, like right in here. I'm going to choose to throw these, I think, into more of a shallow shadow, which is sort of what we're seeing. That's so out of focus there, we don't really know what the background is. But we can sort of, maybe I'll just throw that out of focus, but I do want to indicate that there is some shadow behind there. And I want to indicate that is, well, I think I would like to indicate the shadow behind this whole area right in here. Now let's see how that's going to go. I think about right here. I may just wait about making that decision about light and shadow until I get further into the painting step. I just make a note there, perhaps, of light and shadow there. Now, the no-tan that we do is editable. If I use the water-soluble here on canvas, I can edit that. I can lift out portions after I place the light and shadow pattern on. I can lift out portions if I see I might have scooted too far in one direction or another, and that makes it a very flexible medium to work with. Now, I might want to, for example, edit out and just right here, just a little bit, just to indicate a little bit more light right there. So this, I think, would serve to interpret the pattern of light and shadow, pretty close to the pattern of light and shadow I'm seeing. So that would be what I will usually do when I'm editing the pattern of the light, when I put in the pattern of light and shadow, which is the no-tan itself. What I will usually do is I will stand back and then I'll begin to adjust that light and shadow pattern accordingly. But right now, I think what I'm going to do is to move to show you that next step. Because once you get the light and shadow portion of your painting plotted onto your canvas, then it's time to make some decisions about color. Now, I want to take you through just a brief explanation of coming up with color. Then we'll address this more strongly in the next quick tip. When I'm doing color, I always do this. I always refer to the color wheel. Let's put it like the color wheel normally appears. I always refer to the color wheel. Let's put it like this. And the first thing I will do is say, what is the first color I am seeing? What is the, I may see several colors, but what is the color I see most of? Now, if I'm looking at the color wheel, I'm seeing a lot of red-orange. You see? This is more red-orange. It's more red-orange that leans towards orange. And this is more red-orange that really almost leans towards red. So I see there's lots of red there. And so I will make my decision now about which tube colors I need to select in order then to get the colors I need. The next thing then is to get the values of those colors, but we'll just do the color selection today. So my choice, I need a red-orange. It's going to really be dark. I know I have this one of my favorite colors, which is transparent oxide red, made by Rembrandt. It's a red-orange, so I know that will be one tube color I'm going to need. I can see here I need to make that more intense. This is already desaturated as it comes out of the tube, so it's not bright red-orange. But I need to be able to get it a little brighter And so for that, I'm going to choose the cadmium red light, which is a red leaning towards red-orange. And so I can, can do some mixing there, and I can control that. So those will be the first two colors. Then to decide on the rest of the colors, here's a little process I go through. And I think you will find it very, very helpful to follow this process when you begin to select colors. And we haven't got down to the mixing yet, just making decisions about exploring your colors, exploring what you're going to use in order to interpret what we're doing here. So I've chosen the red. My next color I want to be able to desaturate that. I see lots of desaturated red in here, red-orange, and I want to be able to desaturate that red-orange. And so what do I do? How do I know how to do that? I will go to the color wheel, and I see that red-orange on the color wheel can be desaturated by blue-green. Now, I have two choices there. I can choose two colors that will make blue-green, or I can choose a blue-green. Now, I think for this one, I might go ahead and choose that blue-green. There are two really dark blue-greens that come in tubes. One is called phthalo green, which is really dark, but it's also so strong, it's hard to control. Now, my favorite blue-green, dark, transparent, that comes in the tube is made by Rembrandt. It's the Rembrandt Viridian. And so that would be the next color I would choose. Why? I want to choose a color that's dark and transparent, so I have that ability to create these shadow colors right in here. Desaturate them and make them darker. And so I will choose then that as my next color that will go on the palette. So now I have the two red oranges that go on the palette. I have the blue-green that goes on the palette. I have the ability for the local color, the hue, the first hue I see, and I have the ability to desaturate it. Now I want another ability. I want the ability to be able to cool these colors if I need to. I want to be able to if I need to, if I see them getting a little cooler than I know that blue-green is going to take me, I need that ability to make them cooler. And so in order to do that, I will choose another color, and it's one that I know we can always depend on. Very dark, very transparent, and cool, and that's ultramarine blue. So I will say, okay, that will be my color for cooling the red-orange. Now, I know I could cool it with a Rembrandt, but if I want the ability to make it a little cooler, I can cool it with the Viridian. If I want to make it a little cooler, I can depend upon blue to do that. And I want to be able, what if I want to make it a little warmer than this is? This is very warm already, but what if I want to make it a little warmer? Then I'm going to choose a yellow for that. So I will choose that. My yellow, my favorite is the Hansa Yellow Light. You can choose cadmium yellow light for your yellows. It doesn't matter. And that would be my palette. Those would be the only colors I would use. Now, if I look back, those would be the set of colors I would use to create all the variations I need for red-orange. But I look back and I say, what other colors do I see? I don't see many other colors in there. I see the oranges within the eye there. Well, I've got the ability right here for that. The background colors are relatively neutral. So I have the ability for the neutrals here. But if I saw another color in there, I would then look here to see if I have the ability to get that color and to get the ability to desaturate it, cool it, and warm it. I also need the ability to make all these lighter, and of course that is white, titanium white. So those colors will be the only colors I will need in order to give the full color variation, full value variation, and the full saturation from the most desaturated to the most saturated of all the colors I see in here. So you see how I use the color wheel to show me that. I always make the decisions about colors based on the color wheel. Safest way to go. It will always give you the variety that you need. So that's part 2. Those are the next 2 steps that I will go through before I even begin to put paint on the palette or begin to put paint on the canvas even. And so we will continue. The next quick tip then will show you putting the paint on the palette and how we begin using all the information we've discovered in order to begin creating a painting from it. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.